engaging the students in writing, coding. Everybody get under your desk.
This took place 2 years ago, and I can still recall every moment in almost perfect detail. It was nearing the end of school. Everyone was on their way to their last period, which for me was history, a class that I not only wasn't good at, but I also disliked the teacher, and at that point I honestly had no motivation of even showing up. Ultimately, I decided to ditch and hide out in one of the bathroom stalls located near the very back of the school. Almost no one went back there, so I figured no one would find out anyway. I was in the furthest back stall, playing some game on my phone, when the ear-deafening sound of the principal coming over the intercom made me jump.
Lockdown, lockdown. This is an emergency alert. Please follow lockdown procedures. Go into the nearest room or building, lock the door, and turn off all lights.
It was a lockdown announcement. Though I honestly didn't pay it any attention, considering they were all practice, and so I just continued to sit there in the stall and wait. But just then, all the lights to the building seemingly shut off all at once. The hum of the light faded, along with the buzzing of the AC unit, which meant all the power to the school had been cut off. The bathroom had gone pitch black, and that's when I was actually starting to get worried. Power was never cut off during practice lockdown drills. I texted my friend asking him what was going on, and literally right away he answered back with a text saying, "Dude, where are you? It's a real lockdown. Everyone's asking where you are." I told him I was in the bathroom. He responds saying I should hide. Where else could I go? I'm just gonna run out into the hallway to find a better spot. So ultimately, I decided to stay and hide in the stall I was in. My phone's brightness down and texted my friend again. I asked him what the reason was. Minutes of waiting, he replied saying that apparently there was a kid armed with a knife banging on classroom doors and asking to be let in. Both my classroom and the bathroom I was in were on the same floor, so I turned off my phone and tried my best to see if I could hear anything. There were running footsteps, and that was shortly followed by the sound of the bathroom door opening. I was absolutely horrified at what I was hearing. Whoever entered walked towards the stall next to me, went inside, and shut the door. I held my breath for what seemed like forever. Then, to break the silence, in a shaky voice, I said, "Who's in here?" It was silent for a second, and then I heard a voice reply with, "I'm just looking for a place to hide. I heard there was a lockdown over the speakers." That didn't really answer my question, but the guy sounded around my age, and so I decided I'd just let it go. We sat in silence for what seemed like forever, when finally we got another announcement telling all students to exit the school in an orderly fashion at the front doors, where cops would be waiting outside. I exited the stall, but was surprised to see the guy next to me didn't. I asked him if he was coming. He replied saying, "Yeah man, give me a couple minutes." I thought that was weird, but regardless, I left the bathroom and started heading towards the front exit of the school. As I was walking, my phone went off. My friend texted me. He was older than us, tried to rob a nearby gas station at knife point. The guy actually stabbed a couple people, and when he was unsuccessful in getting any money, he ran to hide in our school to blend in as one of the students. But what horrified me the most was the last sentence. My friend said that the cops outside were saying that the kid was still inside, and that he was hiding somewhere in the back of the school. Reading this changed my walk to the front doors into a full-on sprint. Right as I got outside, I would frantically inform one of the police officers of what I had experienced. And after they searched the bathroom, they found it was empty, but that the window inside was broken. The kid had broken and escaped through the window. Needless to say, for the next few school days, I had gotten a lot of unwanted attention because of what I had experienced. As far as I know, the kid still hasn't been caught, and it's still just difficult for me to come to terms with the fact that I was unknowingly hiding in a stall right next to the guy I was trying to hide from. I somewhat recently got my first real job as a teacher at a public elementary school in a nearby neighborhood. It was the first school year I was teaching, and at this point it was only September, so needless to say, I was still learning the ropes. It was honestly pretty stressful, I teach a first grade class of around 20 kids, so you can imagine how chaotic it would get at times, especially with my lack of experience. I remember one day, I was in the middle of assigning the kids a worksheet for spelling simple words when the principal's voice came over the school's loudspeaker and ordered a lockdown. Now, being a new teacher, I wasn't yet informed of when the school had practiced lockdown drills around the year. Therefore, I had no idea if this was a drill or not. But I knew either way I had to follow protocol. I turned off the room's lights, locked the doors and windows, and had the kids sit against the walls out of sight. I'd say maybe 5 minutes passed of complete silence when I could faintly start to hear doors being banged on down the hall. I could feel my heart start to race as the sounds got louder, as whoever was banging on the doors got closer. At this point, I still had no idea whether it was just the principal checking all the classroom locks or an actual intruder in the school. But my thoughts were interrupted by one of my students bursting out crying. It was too loud. There was no doubt. I could tell. The banging outside stopped in response to the noise, shortly after, followed by a single pair of footsteps walking up to the door. The silence was quickly broken by a male's voice yelling out,
Hey guys, I think there's kids in this one.
and that confirmed this lockdown was real. More footsteps could be heard running up to the door, and that's when genuine attempts to break down the door were made by multiple people. At that point, not a single kid in the class wasn't crying or screaming in fear. I didn't know what to do. I was never trained for this kind of situation, and that's when 2 gunshots could be heard. But it didn't come from the intruders. The police were now inside the building. Right after the shots were fired, the intruders could be heard running down the hall. That's why they did it. They stayed close to nothing. Kids claimed it was a bad. Since this all happened, and I still teach first grade at the same school, and even in the same classroom. And to this day, those bullet holes can still be seen in the school's hallway. This happened back when I was in middle school. Technically, it was actually my last day in middle school. It was late May. For our last day, our school would do a sort of field day where the whole school would play a bunch of games to celebrate the end of the school year. Now, back then, I used to be a pretty active kid, but unfortunately, due to a recent concussion, I was unable to participate in any games the whole day. I was pretty disappointed, yeah, though I did bring my DS and quickly opted to just sit inside one of the classrooms and play that, as, there wasn't really anything else I could do. None of the teachers seemed to mind. So there I was, all by myself in the classroom for my science class playing my DS. All the while the other kids got to play games in the school's gymnasium. It was a weird feeling being in that classroom alone. I don't really know how to explain it. Up until that point, I don't think I'd ever been in a classroom completely alone. Something that needs to be mentioned is that the teachers that were watching the kids in the my DS for not even an hour. My English teacher, Miss Allen, rushed up to the classroom door and closed it from the outside. She didn't say anything to me, so I figured she just wanted to make sure I couldn't hear whatever the teachers were talking about across the hall. Forgetting about it, I went back to playing my DS. A couple minutes later, the classroom's door swung open. I expected to see one of the teachers coming in to check on me. No, a man I'd never seen before walked into the room and closed the door behind him. The guy had to have at least been in his 50s, so I just assumed it was some kid's dad. It wasn't unusual for parents to come into the school to bring a student their lunch, so I asked if he was looking for something. I would know. It seemed almost offended that I would ask that question. Before I could say anything else, the guy started walking towards me. I asked him what he was doing, and that's when he lifted up his shirt, revealing a handgun on his waistband. He followed it up by saying, "Look, kid, I'm gonna need you to come with me, or I'm gonna kill you." The guy said it in the most most carefree tone I had ever heard. And that, along with the fact that I'd never even seen a gun in person before, instantly overwhelmed me with pure fear. Before I could fully comprehend the danger of the situation I was in, the guy firmly grabbed my wrist and started pulling me towards the classroom door. But before we got into the hallway, the deafening sound of our school's lockdown alarm started going off. This was followed by the guy instantly letting go of my wrist, making a run for it down the hall and through a back exit. I stood there in shock for a second, but ultimately went back inside the classroom. I'm not sure how much time had passed. Miss Allen came back into the room and told me that she didn't want to scare me, that there had been an intruder inside the building, and the lockdown, which now was over, had taken place. I would tell her about the man, and instantly she brought me to a police officer who was already on the premises to explain what I'd experienced. Turns out the man was the whole reason the school went into lockdown in the first place. The man was reported to have been scoping out the school all morning, and when he was seen getting close to the building itself, someone would call the police, which resulted in the lockdown. The guy was later caught and would openly admit that he had been trying to scare kids into getting into his car so he could kidnap them. And this reality still horrifies me to this day. Not a day goes by where I'm not thankful for the school's alarm going off when it did.
Study hour and actually had some homework to do. I began working, went for about 20 minutes until I heard an announcement come over the school intercom. It was an announcement of a lockdown, and everyone was instructed to lock their doors and return to their classrooms if they were not in them. I wasn't quite sure if this was a drill or not. The classroom that I was in was in the school, farthest from the locker cabinets and cafeteria, so I figured no teachers would come over there or hear anything. So I just went back to my homework. I will admit though, I was slightly scared, but really I thought nothing of it, because in my time at that high school, we had 2 previous lockdowns, which were basically just false alarms. I was working on my homework when suddenly I heard a knocking at the door. I walked over to the door and saw a kid outside. I opened the door and he told me he had seen a guy in the hallway. The kid seemed to be in a panic, so I let him in the room and we locked the door. The kid explained to me that he went out for a drink of water and saw an older-looking creepy guy walking towards him. The kid wasn't able to get back to his original classroom because he would have to go past the creepy guy. I turned off the lights in the classroom and we both went to the back corner. We sat there in pitch-black silence for several minutes. I whispered over to the kid and asked him what his name was, but he appeared to be gone. Then there was another knocking at the door to the classroom. I was pretty scared at this point, but I slowly got up and walked over to the door. I listened on the other side and heard someone say police. I was shocked. I opened up the door to see several officers. One of them pulled me out of the room immediately. I was as confused as can be, but then I saw them go into the room and a short time later come out with the kid that I had let in. They led him away and they told me that he had been the reason for the lockdown. As it turns out, he was a former student who had graduated 2 years earlier. He had gone to the school and made several threats against the school, but was seen by a staff member shortly after entering. It really creeped me out knowing I had been alone in a classroom. This story happened my senior year of high school, which was about 5 years ago now. That year, they added this new room at the back part of the school. I can't remember the exact name they used for the room, but it was basically just an area with several computers and tables. It was used for giving students extra help with school. It had been made out of an old abandoned classroom that wasn't used for several years. At this time, I had been out of school for 2 days with an ear infection, and in that time, I missed a math test. When I returned to the math teacher, he allowed me to make up the test during study hall, so I went to that new room to take it. The teacher, Mr. Marcus, didn't want to have to go to the room and watch me take the test, so he let me go by myself and said he trusted me not to cheat. I walked all the way over to the room, which was pretty much on the complete opposite end of the school. Once I got to the room, I sat down and began the test. It wasn't too long of a test, but it was a really important one. Right when I got to the third question, the telephone in the room started ringing. I didn't want to get up and answer it, but I figured it was probably Mr. Marcus. I walked over and picked it up. When I did, I was told we were under a lockdown. There was a suspicious person in the building. I was scared being all by myself back in this room with nobody else there. There wasn't even a classroom I could go to, because this classroom was between 2 locker rooms for the gym, which was also nearby. I did what I was instructed to do and shut the door. As I did, it was completely empty and quiet as well. I went back in and decided to turn off the lights. I went out of sight of the door and went towards the back. Then I took out my phone and used the screen to give me some light if I made no questions of the text. However, I couldn't really focus with us being in a lockdown. Suddenly, I heard the door to the room that I was in open. It was at that moment that I remembered I had locked the door. Quickly, I ducked down underneath the table that I was at. I could see just barely from under the table a small amount of light coming in from the doorway and saw boots on the ground. At least they appeared to be boots, as I couldn't really see much. I was terrified. I held my breath. I was in there and stood in the doorway for a while, and then the door shut. I barely heard footsteps walking into the room. I was literally shaking, trying not to make a sound. The room then went completely silent and remained that way. I slowly breathed in and out as quietly as I could. I was expecting at any moment to feel someone grab me from behind or something like that. But then, out of nowhere, I heard the sound of a computer falling off a desk to the ground. Then I heard the noise of a man yelling and screaming. It seemed as though whoever was in this room had gone into a rage and was screaming and smashing things. I opened my eyes and looked over. I still couldn't really see anything, but I could hear where all the noise was coming from, and it was at the opposite end of the classroom to my left. I was terrified and knew I needed to get out. The exit was directly in front of me to the right, and the noises were directly in front of me to the left, so I figured I had to make a run. I took a deep breath, and then got out from under the desk and ran as fast as I could, as whoever was in there continued to seemingly destroy things in the room. I ran forward to the door and was just barely able to see where I was going. I stumbled into a chair just before the door, but I still able to make it up. I heard the man yelling as I left the room and sprinted down the hallway. I ran all the way to the far end of the street, where I saw a police officer. I yelled where the guy was, going to him, and I was right in the school. After some time, I was able to contact the so lucky. It's obviously whoever was in the In my freshman year of high school, during the first semester, I had a civics class as my last class of the day. The school that I went to was pretty average size, I would say. I remember the class that I was in had about 20 kids in it. It was a couple of months into the school year at this point, and on this Thursday afternoon, we were all just listening to the teacher go through some announcements, when suddenly the phone in the classroom rang. The teacher, Mrs. Lindstrom, walked over and answered it. Then she hung up and told us all that the school was going under a lockdown. She seemed pretty serious and told us that this was not a drill. She locked her classroom door and then turned out the lights and instructed us to the back end of the classroom. We all got up from our desks and went to the back. There was a lot of whispering going on, but nobody seemed to know why we were under a lockdown. The longer we all sat back there, the more concerned everyone seemed to get, which made me start to worry. I started thinking of all the possibilities of what could be going on. It got really quiet after a while, and at one point, we heard footsteps going down the hallway, but we didn't know whose they were. The lockdown went on for probably 30 more minutes before it ended. We returned to class for the final 15 minutes or so, but the only thing on my mind was what could have caused it. School was dismissed after that, and I left school to get on my bus. When I got outside of school, I noticed several police cars with flashing lights. Everyone was talking about the lockdown, and I heard several rumors about what it was. But it wasn't until later that night that I got the feelings. My friend Robbie, whose mother worked at the school, told me that the lockdown had been caused by a student who claimed to see a strange man wandering the hall. However, after an extensive search of the school, one of the back doors was seen to be open, and it was determined that the man had left. The area was briefly searched, but the man was never found. Next day, back to the time I got the building, I had forgotten all about what had happened. It was a Friday, so I was pretty much excited to go to the football game. The girl I heard I was left in the business had a little breath. The choir of mass, I just asked if she wanted to sing. Stood there staring at each other for a second. Then the man came towards me and I turned and ran. I ran back to class. When I got back, I told my teacher what I had seen, and the school once again went on another lockdown. This time we stayed locked down for over an hour. I was terrified, but finally it ended, and afterwards everyone was allowed to go home early. They told us the man had finally been caught. But what I don't understand is how they didn't find him the first time the school was locked down. What he was doing inside there in the first place.
As we got to our feet, another message played over the speaker system.
Students of Recall Hall, please remain seated. The school has been put on lockdown. No one is allowed to leave under any circumstances.
We all groaned in annoyance, hardly a soul taking the message seriously. Whatever drill we assumed the school was putting us through, none of us were happy. Only then did I glance outside to see 3 armored military vehicles approaching the school at high speeds. Within a minute, dozens of soldiers poured out with heavy equipment and metal plates, running up to our windows. Drilling the plates in front of our windows, making any thought of escape impossible. "What's happening?" Leo asked from the back of the class. The teacher didn't answer. He looked just as confused as the rest of us. He went to his desk and pulled out a phone, calling the principal, but he didn't answer. "We're just going to stay here, all right? Let them deal with the situation, then we can leave." I dug my mobile phone, only to find that I didn't have any signal. While the school always had crappy service, it never been left without the possibility. Whatever the soldiers had done, it had blocked off our only means of contacting the outside world. I can't call anyone. Other students, even Mr. Morgan's, pulled out their phones, each of them with the same result. "Everybody keep calm. It'll be all right," Mr. Morgan said unconvincingly. "We just need to wait here for them to help." His words were interrupted by frantic screaming coming from the hallway and heavy footsteps running just outside the door. We all sat in silence, listening intently to the commotion going on outside. Then, one by one, the screams were silenced, replaced by distant gurgles. By then, some of my classmates had started crying, while others sat frozen in fear. "Fuck this shit, I'm leaving," one of the students said. It was Jack, the class asshat. He'd always been a daredevil, claiming nothing could scare him. But even for him, this was ridiculous beyond belief. He ran for the door, pulled it open, and started running down the hall. Mr. Morgans was too slow to stop him. He just rushed over to pull the door closed. We all sat back, ready for another bout of screams, but they never came. By all means, it seemed like Jack had made it to safety. But how he'd possibly leave the school, we didn't know. He made it? Leo called from the back. I don't know. It sounds like he's fine. Another one chimed in. As the news of his escape hit us, more of the students started feeling confident we could get out with him. Whatever the military had blocked the school for, it wasn't to keep us safe, so staying in one place might end up getting us all killed. While Mr. Morgans demanded we stay back, he couldn't fight us all, so a group consisting of 4 students, including myself, decided to leave. Leo took the lead, sticking his head outside the door and signaling that it was all clear. We ducked into the hallway in silence, making sure it was empty. The place was clear and quiet, a stark contrast to both its usual self and the screaming of the military. We unanimously decided to head in the opposite direction of the sound, which also went towards the main exit. While we all figured the main exit was blocked, we were hoping one of the ventilation shafts had been forgotten, and the only vent entrance we knew about was situated in the corridors. If Jack had made it outside, as we walked down the hall, the lights suddenly went out. It appeared that the electricity had been cut, because even the ventilation system fell silent, meaning the whole building was. The only light we had then came from our mobile phones, but it didn't provide any comfort. Then, I slipped and hit my head on the ground. It hurt, and as I went to rub the back of my head, it felt wet. At first, I was worried I might have cracked my head open, but then I realized that my entire back was wet. Leo shined his flashlight, immediately gasped as he realized I was covered in blood. The only issue was, it didn't belong to me. The entire hallway was covered in blood. The floor, the walls, and the ceiling. Maybe we should turn back? No, we need to get out, Tyler argued back. We kept going, slowly moving forward in silence, until we finally saw the exit. As suspected, the doors had been sealed shut by the same vents. But next to the door stood a ladder leading up to the vent, probably the one Jack had used to escape. Tyler rushed to the front and started ascending the ladder. As he got to the vent, he froze in place. Jack, he said quietly, he's in there.
Well, guys, we did it. Yup, we have did it. Reading Nora's first time on video. Let's go. Well, that's gonna be it for today's video. Bye.